She opened the door and froze. A wild bobcat, injured, bleeding, stood on her porch. Most people would have slammed it shut. She let it in. What happened next? No one could have predicted. The neighbors said it would attack her. Animal control warned her to stay away. But the bond they formed, raw, real, impossible, shattered everything we thought we knew about wild animals. And when fire broke out one stormy night, that bobcat didn't run. He ran back in. What was he trying to save? This isn't just survival. It's love, wild, untamed, and unforgettable. Unlikely companions, a woman alone, and a wild heart. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the red rocks of Sedona, Arizona. Wind rustled through the scrubby junipers, and the scent of dust and pine hung thick in the air. At the edge of town, tucked away on a narrow gravel road, stood a modest log cabin. It was quiet, peaceful, almost too quiet. Inside, Lena Holbrook, 46, stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing the last of her teacup. She was tall and lean, with strong cheekbones and a sharpness in her green eyes that hadn't dulled despite the years. Her hands were calloused, her arms toned from decades of hauling camera gear across rugged landscapes. Photography had once been her world. Portraits of grizzlies in Alaska, eagles mid-dive in Colorado. But now, her lens collected dust. It had been nearly a year since she moved here. After her husband died suddenly from a heart attack, Lena left their home in Flagstaff, retreating into the wilderness she once only visited. Her daughter Anna had begged her not to go. "You don't need to be alone out there," she'd said. But Lena wasn't running from loneliness. She was running toward silence. And in Sedona's wild, whispering valleys, she found it. That afternoon, as she stepped onto the back porch with a wool blanket wrapped over her shoulders, something caught her eye. Movement, low to the ground, unsteady. A bobcat kitten, no bigger than a small house cat, staggered out from beneath the weathered deck. Its right hind leg dragged slightly, leaving faint trails in the dust. Its coat was matted and thinned, a muted reddish-brown speckled with black spots. Ears tipped in dark tufts twitched, alert but exhausted. And its eyes, large, golden, wild, locked onto hers. Lena's breath caught. Instinct screamed, "Stay back." But instinct wasn't stronger than the ache that pulsed in her chest, the ache that had lived there since grief took root. She stepped down slowly, crouched low, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey there, sweetheart. What happened to you?" The bobcat didn't growl, didn't bolt. It simply swayed on its paws, then collapsed, right there beside the porch step. Lena stared, heart racing. This was no stray kitten. This was a lynx rufus, a predator. She'd photographed one only once, 5 years ago in New Mexico. They were elusive, solitary, and fiercely untamable. The kind of animal you admired from behind a telephoto lens, never from 10 feet away. But this one was hurt and alone. So was she. Without thinking, Lena grabbed an old flannel shirt from inside, wrapped it around her hands, and approached carefully. The bobcat flinched, but didn't resist. It was weak, feverish. Ribs showed through its fur. There were signs of dehydration, and its paw looked swollen, possibly broken. "I shouldn't do this," she murmured to herself. And yet, moments later, the wild cat lay on a folded comforter in a corner of her living room, beside the fireplace. Lena dialed the Arizona Wildlife Rescue Center, but the line went to voicemail. Roads were washed out from the recent storm, no pickups for at least 3 days. "I'll call again in the morning," she told herself. But she knew. She wasn't letting him go that easily. That night, she barely slept. The bobcat, despite his injury, never made a sound. He didn't yowl or hiss. He just lay there, eyes half-lidded, breathing shallow and slow. Lena named him Jasper, By morning, he was still alive, barely. She fed him small drops of water with a syringe. When she brought him a shallow dish of shredded chicken, he growled once, a low, warning grumble, but then ate every piece, methodically. Over the next 48 hours, she tended to him with the quiet patience of someone who had nothing but time. And in return, Jasper didn't lash out. He didn't claw or bite. He simply watched her, those gold eyes following every move. There was something behind that gaze, an emotion she couldn't name. Not trust, not yet, but not fear either. Curiosity, maybe. Weariness. Or recognition. And when she sat beside him that third night, her knees aching from kneeling too long, Jasper, without any sign or sound, pressed his head gently against her hand. Lena froze. It was a touch, small, instinctive, delicate. But it was a beginning. She didn't know what the coming weeks would hold, whether Jasper would recover, whether he would stay, whether he would ever return to the wild. But in that quiet moment, as flames flickered in the hearth, and wild eyes blinked slowly in the dark, Lena felt something shift. Maybe they weren't so different after all. Two creatures caught between instinct and emotion, healing in silence. Lena's decision, crossing a line between care and connection. The following morning brought a sky of pale gold and sharp desert chill. Lena stood at the kitchen window, fingers wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. Steam rose from her coffee, but her eyes were fixed on the shape curled up near the fireplace. Jasper hadn't moved much overnight. His breathing was steadier, his wound no longer bleeding. Still, he looked fragile, out of place, wild. She had made a plan. Wake up, call the Wildlife Rescue Center again, and arrange for a proper pickup. They'd take him, rehabilitate him, and release him back where he belonged. That was the way it worked. But the phone sat untouched. Instead, she moved quietly around the cabin, placing a fresh bowl of water by Jasper's side, followed by finely chopped turkey breast she'd saved from last night's dinner. He didn't stir until she stepped back. Then slowly he sniffed the air and began to eat. He still didn't trust her. Not fully, but he no longer feared her. Lena sat on the edge of the couch, watching him. Something inside her, something that had been cold and cracked for over a year, began to thaw. He was a bobcat, yes, a wild animal. But he was also hurt, alone, and responding to care in a way that spoke louder than any growl or hiss. She couldn't send him away. Not yet. She found an old wooden baby gate in the shed and set it up across the hallway to the bedrooms. She cleared one of the storage closets and turned it into a makeshift den, padding it with old towels, flannel sheets, and a thick crate cushion she used for camping. Jasper limped after her, testing each step, sniffing every corner before curling up in the nest she'd built. That night, he didn't sleep by the fire. He slept in the room next to hers. 3 days passed. Still no answer from the rescue center. Lena didn't mind. The injury on Jasper's leg had scabbed over. She soaked it daily with warm water and Epsom salt, and applied an antiseptic cream approved for feline use, left over from when Anna's cat, Pepper, had lived with them years ago. Jasper tolerated the treatments in eerie silence. Sometimes he'd flinch. Sometimes he'd growl under his breath. But he never lashed out. He was learning her rhythm, just as she was learning his. By day 6, he followed her from room to room, his limp less pronounced, his coat a little shinier. He didn't purr, not like a house cat would, but he made these low, almost vibrational sounds when she spoke to him in a soft voice, a kind of wild hum. At night, she read aloud to herself. It had become a ritual after her husband's death, one she never gave up. Now, when her voice floated through the cabin, she could see Jasper's ears flick in her direction, and sometimes, just sometimes, he would settle closer to her chair. Still, she kept her distance. She didn't try to pet him again, didn't assume his presence meant affection. She simply let him be. And in letting him be, he stayed. By the second week, the Wildlife Center finally returned her call. "Are you the one with the Bobcat kitten out near the Dry Creek Basin?" a tired voice asked. "Yes. We can arrange pickup next Thursday. He's likely not more than 6 months. He'll be rehabilitated and released." Lena hesitated. "What if I wanted to continue caring for him? Until he's strong enough." A pause on the line. "Ma'am, these aren't pets. They're solitary carnivores. Instinctual. Dangerous. The longer you keep him, the harder it'll be to reintegrate him." "I'm aware." There was a beat of silence. Then, "If you want to apply for a temporary wildlife holding permit, we can send the paperwork." Lena stared at Jasper, who was now curled in a sun patch near the back door, eyes half shut, chest rising and falling slowly. "Yes," she said. "Send it." The paperwork arrived via overnight courier. Over the next 3 days, Lena completed the inspections, filed the permits, and scheduled a remote check-in with a wildlife behaviorist. Jasper continued to improve. She began taking him into the fenced back area, allowing him to feel the earth under his paws again. He sniffed at tree trunks, pounced lazily at dry leaves, and slinked through the grass like a shadow. There were moments when his wildness flared. He once hissed at a hawk's shadow that passed overhead. He shredded a blanket when startled by a thunderclap. He knocked a bowl off the counter and vanished under the couch for 2 hours. But he always came back. Always. One night, after a long walk outside, Lena sat on the porch steps, her sweater wrapped tightly around her, staring at the stars. Jasper rested a few feet away, eyes closed, head on his paws. She whispered into the cool wind, unsure if he could hear her, unsure if it mattered. "I don't know what you are to me yet," she said softly. "But I think maybe you're saving me as much as I'm saving you." Jasper didn't move, but his ears twitched. And somehow that was enough. Trust is never instant, especially not with wild things. But as the days stretched into weeks, and silence turned into presence, Lena began to realize something profound. She hadn't just made a decision to help a creature heal. She'd made the decision to let herself feel again. The learning curve. 2 creatures, 1 lesson at a time. It didn't take long for reality to set in. Bobcats weren't built for cabins. They were built for cliffs, for pouncing, for hunting, for being alone. And Lena, for all her tenderness and patience, wasn't trained to care for wild predators. She had read field guides, observed them through camera lenses. But living with one? That was something else entirely. Jasper didn't make it easy. The first time she turned her back for 5 minutes, he knocked her grandmother's ceramic pitcher off the kitchen shelf. Shards flew across the floor like shrapnel. Later that night, he shredded one of the couch cushions while trying to bury a raw chicken thigh she'd given him. Lena sighed as she swept up the stuffing, watching him pace behind the screen door like a lion in a cage. "You're not a house cat," she murmured, "and I need to stop expecting you to act like one." But she couldn't deny something else. Jasper was trying, in his own way. He didn't growl unless he was frightened. He never swiped at her. And sometimes, when she sat quietly by the fireplace, he'd curl up near her feet, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. Over the next few weeks, Lena studied him the way she once studied animals in the wild. She learned his rhythms. Active at dawn and dusk, sleeping during the heat of midday. He preferred food hidden, not served in bowls. So she started tucking chunks of meat under logs, inside cardboard boxes, even under couch cushions she didn't mind sacrificing. He needed stimulation, puzzle feeders, moving shadows, branches to climb and swat. So she built a structure in the backyard with platforms and ramps, using old crates and planks. She stopped calling them toys. They were tools for survival, not entertainment. One evening, while raking leaves outside, Lena heard a low yowl from the porch. She turned to find Jasper frozen, hackles raised, staring toward the woods. Then she saw it, a coyote lurking at the tree line. Without a second thought, she shouted and waved her arms, startling the creature. It disappeared into the trees. When she turned back, Jasper was no longer on the porch. He had sprinted inside. She found him crouched beneath the dining table, tail flicking anxiously. "You get scared too, huh?" she said, crouching beside him. He didn't respond, but he didn't run either. As winter edged closer, so did the bond between them. Jasper began approaching her without coaxing. At night, he'd lay by the base of her bed. He still avoided touch, but he no longer flinched when she moved too quickly or spoke too loud. And then, one morning, something changed. Lena sat on the porch, her mind adrift, tears stinging her eyes. It was the anniversary of her husband's death, a date she tried to ignore, but couldn't. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing softly. She didn't hear Jasper approach, but she felt the weight of him, gently, deliberately, press against her side. When she looked down, his head rested near her hip, golden eyes watching her, still and quiet. No hissing, no fear, just presence. And something else, not pity, not instinct, something like understanding. It was that moment Lena stopped doubting what she already knew deep down. Wild didn't mean incapable of emotion, of empathy, of connection. Jasper wasn't tamed, but he was choosing her. Every day. Their world was still delicate, built on trust, not ownership. But within that fragile space, something extraordinary had begun to bloom. Not dominance, not dependence, but the kind of quiet loyalty that doesn't need words. Signs of real emotion when wild eyes begin to soften. The mornings had changed. Lena used to wake to the sound of silence, a stillness so heavy it felt like the world had stopped turning. Now, she awoke to the soft patting of paws outside her door, followed by a familiar shape sitting patiently in the hallway, his tufted ears alert. Jasper had found a rhythm in the house, and with it, something more subtle, comfort. He no longer darted when Lena entered a room. He didn't need to be coaxed inside after walks through the back enclosure. In fact, some mornings, he waited by the door until she opened it, then brushed past her legs without a glance, as if to say, "I'm home. You know this now." But it wasn't the routine that startled Lena most. It was the gestures. The feather, for instance. One chilly morning, she found it on the porch step. Pale gray, delicate, curled slightly at the end. At first, she thought it had blown in on the wind. But then Jasper appeared beside her, eyes fixed on her reaction. "Did you bring this?" she asked, half laughing. He blinked once, then turned and walked back inside. She found more, a pine cone on her pillow, a rock placed neatly by the firewood stack, a piece of string from her camera bag set right in front of her chair. He wasn't just exploring. He was gifting, sharing. It reminded her of a behavior she'd seen in wolves, offering tokens of affection to those in their inner circle. Only now, it wasn't a packmate. It was her. Neighbors noticed the change too, and not kindly. One afternoon, while Lena was checking the mailbox at the edge of her property, Dean Walker, her closest neighbor, pulled up in his mud-splattered pickup truck. He rolled down the window, eyes narrowed. "You still got that Bobcat in your house?" Lena didn't flinch. "Yes," Dean scoffed. "You know what happened to my chickens last week? Ripped right through the coop. Tracks looked just like that animal of yours." "He hasn't left the property in over a month." "You sure about that?" Dean leaned closer. "One of these days, he's gonna turn on you, and no one will be around to help." She didn't respond. There was no point arguing with someone who believed wildness and danger were the same thing. But that night, Lena sat on the porch longer than usual, Jasper curled near her boots. The stars blinked above, cold and watchful. "People don't get it," she whispered. "But I do." Jasper didn't move. He just stared at the night, ears twitching to some far-off sound only he could hear. More signs emerged. When Lena was happy, laughing at an old photograph or dancing clumsily to a scratched record, Jasper would roll on his back, legs in the air, his body loose with contentment. When she was tense, arguing with a call from her daughter, or pacing the room in frustration, he'd watch her silently, then disappear to his den, as if giving her space. And when she was heartbroken, like on the day she received the final letter from the VA denying her husband's death benefits, Jasper did something that shattered her. He climbed onto the couch beside her, not touching but near. Then, slowly, he rested his head on her lap. Lena cried harder than she had in months, not because she was sad, but because she knew. This animal, the one everyone said was incapable of affection, had seen her pain, and offered the only comfort he knew: presence, stillness, a kind of love that didn't ask for anything in return. But not everyone believed in what they had built, and sometimes, no matter how much care and connection you share, the outside world comes knocking. Hard. What neither of them knew was that their bond would soon be tested in fire, fear, and fury. Conflict with the neighbor, fear at the fence line. The first shot rang out just after sunrise. Lena was in the garden, trimming dead branches from her rosemary bushes, when the crack of a rifle shattered the morning stillness. Birds scattered from the trees. Jasper, who had been lounging in a patch of sunlight by the shed, bolted inside in a flash of tawny fur. She stood frozen, pruning shears gripped tightly in her hand. Another shot echoed, closer this time. Then, the unmistakable growl of Dean Walker's voice carried over the fence line. "You better keep that animal tied down, Holbrook. Next time he crosses onto my land, I won't miss." Lena dropped the shears and marched to the edge of her property. Dean stood on the other side of the wire fence, rifle resting in the crook of his elbow, a dead hen at his feet. "He didn't do that," she said coldly. Dean sneered. "Tracks go straight from the coop to your property. You think I'm stupid?" "He hasn't left my yard." "Bobcats don't stay caged. It's only a matter of time before he decides your arms look like rabbit meat." Lena's hands trembled, but she kept her voice even. "He's recovering. He's licensed. And he's done nothing wrong." Dean stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You want to play Snow White out here? Be my guest. But when that thing starts taking down pets or people, don't come crying to me." He turned and walked away, the crunch of gravel under his boots, sharp and deliberate. That evening, Lena double-checked every latch on the backyard enclosure. Jasper paced restlessly inside, his body tense, tail twitching. She sat beside him, separated by a thin wire mesh, and whispered, "You didn't do anything. I know that." He paused, eyes searching hers. Then slowly he pressed his forehead against the fence, an echo of the gesture he had made that first week. The world outside their home didn't trust what they had, didn't believe wild and human could live side by side without fear. But Lena did, and Jasper, in his own silent way, did too. It would have been enough if judgment were all they had to endure. But nature had its own trial waiting, one that would push them beyond fear, beyond instinct, into the heart of what it meant to protect. The blizzard, stranded and still together. The storm rolled in faster than any forecast had warned. By late afternoon, the sky over Sedona had turned a flat, menacing gray. Winds howled through the canyons, flinging needles of snow sideways. By nightfall, visibility dropped to just a few feet. The power blinked once, then died completely. Lena lit candles, cranked the gas stove, and layered herself in 2 flannel shirts. The generator had failed weeks ago, and she hadn't replaced it yet. She wasn't prepared for this. No one in Arizona really was. But she wasn't alone. Jasper stayed close. As the temperature inside the cabin dropped, Lena shuffled to the shed to grab more firewood. The wind cut like knives. On her way back, her boot caught on a half-buried root. She slipped, twisting her ankle with a sharp crack. The pain stole her breath. She cried out, barely able to stand. That's when she saw Jasper through the blowing snow, silhouetted in the cabin's dim light. He darted outside, not away, but toward her. In seconds, he was at her side, eyes wide, tail flicking anxiously. "It's okay," she gasped. "Just twisted." But he didn't leave. He circled her, nudging her shoulder with his nose, pawing at the edge of her coat. When she tried crawling, he stayed inches away, pressing against her side as if to brace her. Together, inch by inch, they made it back to the door. Inside, by the fire, Lena wrapped her swollen ankle in a damp cloth. Jasper lay down beside her, head resting gently against her knee. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, a wild animal refused to leave her side. But storms pass. And sometimes in their wake, something even more devastating comes. Something that tests not only loyalty, but life itself. The fire. When fear turned into courage. The snow hadn't fully melted when the fire came. It started in the old shed, likely from frayed wiring she'd meant to fix last fall. A faint burning smell reached Lena first. Sharp, electric, wrong. She limped to the window, heart dropping at the sight of thick smoke billowing from behind the cabin. She didn't think. She just moved. Grabbing a coat, she stumbled outside, ankle still weak, lungs already choking on smoke. The fire had caught fast. Wind from the storm's tail fanned the flames higher. Inside the shed, her husband's old film reels, her photo archives, decades of memories, burning. "No!" she gasped, throwing open the shed door, trying to pull the heavy box of negatives off the shelf. A crashing beam blocked the exit. She was trapped. The air thickened. Flames roared like freight trains around her. Then, a flash of movement. Jasper. He'd followed her. Smoke curled around his wiry frame as he ducked through the broken side panel. His eyes locked on hers. Wild and urgent. He darted behind her, pawing at the back of her coat, tugging, yanking. "Go!" she coughed. "Get out of here!" But he wouldn't. With one final pull, he dragged her toward the hole in the wall. She dropped to her knees, crawling, scraping against splintered wood until she tumbled into the cold, wet grass. Jasper leapt out behind her. The shed collapsed. Lena lay shaking in the snow-damp earth, coughing, eyes wide with disbelief. And beside her, a bobcat, scorched, soot-covered, panting, watched her with something that looked a lot like worry. Not instinct, not fear, but the kind of love that refuses to leave, even when everything burns. And suddenly, the whole town saw what she had always known. This wasn't just survival. This was devotion. Community sees the truth, the day. Everything changed. The fire trucks came too late. By the time Lena and Jasper were pulled into the back of an ambulance, the shed was a smoking skeleton of ash and char. But the cabin had been spared, thanks to the snow-soaked ground and an old stone wall that stopped the flames from spreading. Lena refused to be taken to the hospital. "Just sprained," she insisted, wincing as a paramedic wrapped her ankle tighter. "He saved me." They looked at her, then at the bobcat lying still at her feet, chest rising and falling with steady, shallow breaths. No one spoke. It wasn't until Dr. Maya Bishop, the local vet and wildlife rehab liaison, arrived that the silence broke. She crouched down beside Jasper, speaking in a low, measured voice. This is the bobcat you've been caring for? Lena nodded. He pulled me out. He wouldn't leave. Maya ran gentle fingers through Jasper's soot-darkened fur, examining a burn near his haunch. He's injured. He needs care. I can do it, Lena said instantly. I have everything, saline, antibiotics, the field permit. Maya hesitated. Then she looked Lena in the eye. And you really believe this animal knows you? Cares for you? Lena didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached a hand toward Jasper. He lifted his head, just barely, and pressed his nose into her palm. Maya stood up slowly, turning to the growing crowd of neighbors and responders, now gathered along the fence line. Among them was Dean Walker, arms folded, eyes fixed on the scene. I saw it, one of the firemen muttered. That cat, he pulled her out. Dean scoffed. That doesn't make him safe. No, Maya replied. It makes him something more. That night, the story spread like wildfire. Fittingly enough. Local radio picked it up, then a regional blog. Woman saved from fire by Bobcat companion, the headline read. People started stopping by Lena's cabin, not to complain but to offer help. A donated heating lamp, a portable generator, extra medical supplies for Jasper. One woman even dropped off a handmade sign that read, Wild Hearts Welcome Here. Even Dean stayed quiet after that. He didn't apologize. But one day, a week later, Lena found a wrapped package on her porch, a bag of organic raw meat and a pair of leather gloves. No note, just Dean's truck tracks in the snow. Jasper began healing slowly. His burns scabbed over, and the singed fur began to fall away, revealing fresh new growth beneath. He rested more now, and followed Lena less obsessively. But his eyes never stopped tracking her. If she cried, he came closer. If she laughed, he relaxed beside her. One morning, she caught him watching her from the edge of the woods, his body half turned toward the trees, the wild calling. But he didn't leave. Not yet. The community may have changed their opinion. But Jasper, he had made his decision long ago. But wild hearts don't stay forever, and love, the real kind, knows when to hold on and when to let go. Letting go with love, the wild always finds its way home. Spring crept into Sedona on soft feet. The snow vanished from the canyon edges. Cacti began to bloom again. The air was warmer, the days longer. With the change of season came something else, an undercurrent Lena couldn't ignore. Jasper was growing restless. He still slept near the porch most nights, still greeted her with that quiet, solemn gaze, still watched her move around the cabin like a sentinel. But he also began spending more time by the tree line. Sometimes he disappeared for hours. Once, an entire day. Lena never asked him to stay. She simply left the porch light on and food in the dish near the door. Some mornings, it was untouched. Others, the meat was gone, but the paw prints in the mud didn't return to the cabin. Just vanished into the wild. She knew what was coming, and her heart ached. One crisp morning, she found him sitting at the edge of the woods. The sun glinted off his fur, thicker now, fully healed. The burns had vanished, leaving only faint scars under the dense coat. He looked strong, healthy, whole. She walked toward him slowly, a mug of coffee in one hand, her ankle still wrapped tight from the lingering weakness. He didn't move, but his eyes, they held something different now, peace. Hey, Jasper, she said softly. I know. She didn't say goodbye. He wouldn't understand the word. Instead, she sat beside him in the dirt, close but not touching, and watched the wind move through the trees. Birds chirped above them. Somewhere in the distance, water trickled down a canyon wall. Minutes passed. Then Jasper stood. He looked at her one last time and turned away. No drama. No farewell cry. just the quiet retreat of a wild soul going back to the place he was born to roam. Lena stayed there a long time, blinking back tears, clutching the mug like a lifeline. She thought she'd feel empty, hollow, but instead, she felt full, grateful. He had come when she needed him most, and he had stayed until they both were healed. That night, she found something left behind on the porch. A single smooth riverstone, small enough to fit in her palm. She didn't recognize it. Jasper had never brought one like it before. She picked it up, closed her fingers around it, and smiled. No words, no goodbyes, just a gift, a final message. I was here, and I loved you in the only way I knew how. Lena placed the stone beside the feather he'd brought her months ago, both resting atop the old photo albums she'd rescued from the fire. As the stars blinked awake above Sedona, she sat by the fire once more, alone, but not lonely. Because somewhere out there, under the same sky, was a creature with golden eyes and a heart that had once learned how to love. And maybe, just maybe, he remembered her too. Sometimes love doesn't come wrapped in words or human form. Sometimes it comes in silence, in stillness, in fur and claws and golden eyes watching you with quiet loyalty. Lena and Jasper's story reminds us that trust must be earned, not demanded. That healing is not always loud. It's often slow, tender, and built moment by moment. In a world quick to judge what it doesn't understand, their bond defied assumptions. Because love, real love, doesn't ask what species you are. It simply shows up, stays, and protects. So the next time you're tempted to build a wall, to keep something or someone out, ask yourself, what might happen if you open the door instead? At Paw Prints Stories, we share true tales that touch the heart and prove one simple truth. The lines between humans and animals aren't barriers. They're bridges. If this story moved you, stay with us. Let your heart be the kind that listens for paw steps and leaves space for the unexpected. And before this story fades into the quiet, here's our challenge to you. Let love in, even if it looks nothing like you expected. End.